On the clock on the BBC, with 3 chances to catch up on the day's events. Olympic reports at 7 in the morning and at 12:30 in the afternoon, ending with the day down under at 7 in the evening. Plus, live coverage from Sydney throughout the night and into the morning. Whatever the time of day, keep pace with 2 weeks of unbelievable TV. The Olympic Games throughout September on the BBC.
The news now on BBC One with Peter Sissons.
Tony Blair arrives for Labour's conference after 2 weeks he'd rather forget. He insists the party's in good shape, despite another opinion poll setback. Diana's former aide condemns the palace for turning her into a rebel. And Redgrave joins the sporting legends with his 5th gold at his 5th Olympics. Good evening. Tony Blair arrived in Brighton today for Labour's conference, insisting the party was in good shape and dismissing yet another opinion poll putting the Tories ahead. But after his damaging skirmish with the fuel protesters, he walked straight into fierce lobbying inside his own party for a substantial increase in pensions. Tonight the case was pressed on him again by the leaders of the biggest unions.
Tony Blair's arrival is always the moment that gives delegates a lift. But he's never faced such a daunting pre-conference build-up. He's struggling to regain the initiative after the chaos of the fuel dispute. Mr. Blair welcomed a new pensioner to the party, the defecting former Tory mayor of Hove. But on pensions, he's facing a likely defeat, with the unions insisting the government restores the link with earnings, and that Gordon Brown's offer to increase minimum incomes isn't enough.
It can only be a stepping stone towards the proper, fair objective. That is restoration of the link, which will guarantee that in future all pensioners benefit from the prosperity of our country.
Tony Blair and John Prescott were soon hard at work trying to win over the unions against the background of more unwelcome news from the opinion polls. The latest by NOP put the Conservatives on 40%, 8 points ahead of Labour, with the Liberal Democrats up on 22%. Mr. Blair is still confident he can restore Labour's fortunes once the real choices are faced up to by voters.
It's about essential investment in our public services, or massive cuts in investment in schools and hospitals under the Conservatives. And it's about getting people back into work, because that provides a society where there's opportunity for everyone, not just a few. So I think, when you get back to those fundamental questions, I think we're in pretty good shape.
The possibility of a defeat on pensions and a run of opinion polls putting the Conservatives ahead are making it an uncomfortable weekend for the Labour leadership. Hardly the kind of pre-election party conference which Tony Blair had planned for. Nicholas Jones, BBC News, Brighton.
A Sunday newspaper has begun serialising the book Buckingham Palace didn't want published. In it, Princess Diana's former aide, Patrick Jeffson, describes how a cold-hearted palace forced her to become an outsider.
This is what has made the Queen and Prince Charles so angry. As the first extracts from Patrick Jeffson's book rolled off the presses tonight, it was clear that the royal family and the palace will not come off lightly. Mr. Jeffson, who was at the princess's side for 8 years, accuses them of turning her into a rebel. He says her behaviour was the result of a chronic feeling of rejection. As he puts it, a small handful of sugar lumps could have brought her back into the fold. His claims are curiously at odds with the views he expressed after her death, when he said the senior members of the household had been unfailingly helpful to the princess. The book says she liked the Queen, but found her small and sad. But Diana herself is criticised by her former aide. Mr. Jeffson alleges that she sacked her staff compulsively, lied, schemed, and had a desperate need for attention. He also quotes the princess as saying she'd once confronted Camilla Parker Bowles and pleaded with her to leave Prince Charles alone, but she'd been stonily rebuffed by both of them. The main concern at the palace remains the effect this book will have on Prince William and Prince Harry. William is on a plane tonight on his way back from Mauritius. The headlines about his mother will prove an unwelcome homecoming. Jenny Bond, BBC News at Buckingham Palace.
2 fertility clinics in Hampshire say frozen embryos stored for their patients may have gone missing. It happened at the private Hampshire clinic in Basingstoke and the nearby North Hampshire Hospital. One member of staff has been suspended. 40 patients are affected, but the health authority is stressing there's no chance of a woman getting back the wrong eggs. Police have charged the former dresser to the Duchess of York, Jane Andrews, with the murder of her boyfriend, Thomas Cressman, who was found dead at the couple's London home. She was arrested last week after a nationwide hunt. She's due to appear in court on Monday. Ministers from the 7 richest nations say they're ready to defend the world economy from the risks posed by high oil prices and a weak euro. The G7 ministers meeting in the Czech Republic called on OPEC to curb the price of crude oil. They also pledged more support for the euro if needed.
The men in charge of the world's richest economies arrive with 2 matters on their minds: the low value of the euro and the high price of oil. On the euro, the world's industrial nations, G7, chaired now by Germany, said buying euros to push the exchange rate up would continue if necessary.
In light of recent developments, we will continue to monitor developments closely and to cooperate in exchange market as appropriate.
There's a noisy background to the conference in Prague. Protests against global capitalism, pro-environment protests, protests calling for debt relief for poor countries. But G7 politicians also remember the protests back home from consumers of petrol who want prices down.
I believe we will have support from all the major countries. I believe tomorrow when the International Monetary Fund meets and on Monday when the World Bank meets, all the countries from the developed and the developing world will take the same view that the oil producers themselves should take further action.
On oil and the euro there does seem to be some unity, but intentions alone can't buck markets.
These people are thinking hard about the political consequences of rising oil prices. It is, after all, their jobs which are on the line. There will be strong words from the meetings this coming week. Whether it's anything more than verbal pressure, though, remains to be seen. Stephen Evans, BBC News, Prague.
Here, the Scottish National Party has elected John Swinney as its new leader. In his acceptance speech, Mr Swinney paid tribute to the outgoing leader, Alex Salmond, and he said that for the first time there was a realistic prospect of independence for Scotland. Parts of the Midlands have been affected by the worst earthquake to hit Britain in 10 years. It was centred on Warwick and was felt as far away as Solihull and Banbury in Oxfordshire. Experts say it was a light quake in world terms. But people were woken as houses shook and windows rattled. There are no reports of damage. The funeral of Paula Yates has been held at Davington in Kent, near the home she once shared with her former husband, Bob Geldof. The television presenter was found dead at her house in London last Sunday, as well as friends and family. Villagers also gathered to pay their respects. Now, with news of how the British rower Steve Redgrave got himself an invitation to Buckingham Palace and the rest of today's sport, here's Rob Bonnet.
Thanks, Peter. Well, Steve Redgrave and his colleagues from Britain's victorious coxless fort, the Sydney Olympics, have been invited by the Queen to a reception in November to celebrate their triumph. The invitation followed Steve Redgrave's 5th consecutive gold medal, an achievement witnessed by 7 million people in Britain watching the race on television in the early hours of this morning.
Up in the air.
Steve Redgrave on top of the world, one of the greatest figures in Olympic history, a 5th gold medal round his neck. The coxless four had started as favourites, 2,000 metres of calm, clear water between them and glory. They got the start they wanted and took an early lead, urged on by a huge British contingent in the crowd and Redgrave's family screaming themselves hoarse. It was not an easy win, the Italian crew less than half a second behind. But to one man, it was never in doubt.
It's 4 years of hard work, a lot of traumas for all of us in different ways. Just had a good feeling all week. I knew it was going to go well.
Today, he's one of the most important athletes in the Olympic history. He's really in the first line, no? And was very good for Great Britain, but also excellent for the Olympic movement.
What Redgrave has achieved over the past 20 years is unlikely ever to be repeated.
This has been one of the most remarkable achievements in Olympic history, not just for Redgrave, but for Pinson, now of course 3 times gold medalists, and Foster and Cracknell.
Regardless of what he does decide to do next, his place in sporting history is assured. Adam Minot, BBC News, at the Sydney International Regatta Centre.
Now on to football, and Charlton Athletic provided the biggest shock of the day in the FA Carling Premiership. They won 1-0 at Newcastle. Graham Stewart with the 8th minute goal that took them to 5th in the league. Elsewhere, Michael Owen's 7th Premiership goal of the season gave Liverpool a share of the points against Sunderland, and Frank Lampard scored the last of West Ham's goals as they moved off the bottom of the table with a 3-0 win at Coventry. The games between Bradford and Southampton, Ipswich and Arsenal, and Manchester United against Chelsea will be featured on Match of the Day after the news. Time to look away if you don't know the results and want it to stay that way. Meanwhile, in Scotland, Stilian Petrov scored the only goal as Celtic beat Dundee 1-0, and Robbie Winters scored a hat-trick to give Aberdeen a 5-3 win in a remarkable game at Dundee United. The games between Dunfermline and Hibs and Motherwell against Rangers are on Sports Scene this evening. It's look-away time once again. Well, back at the Olympics, and another British medal to report. This time, though, it's silver, and from the Athletics Stadium. Steve Redgrave coming second in the javelin. But the two British finalists in the men's 100 metres went away empty-handed behind the winner, Maurice Greene.
With the European champion Darren Campbell in the final, along with Dwayne Chambers, there were hopes of a British medal, but it wasn't to be. The 100-metre world record holder, Maurice Greene, lived up to his promise of a gold medal. The American celebrated victory over Atto Bolden in second place, while Obadele Thompson took the bronze. Chambers came agonisingly close to third, but dipped too early as he approached the finishing line. In the women's final, Marion Jones won her first gold of the Games with ease. Unbeaten over 100 metres since 1997, Jones is aiming for an unprecedented 5 track and field titles in Sydney. In the javelin, Steve Redgrave secured Britain's first medal in the Olympic Stadium. He broke the Olympic record with this throw, but eventually had to settle for silver, repeating his success in Atlanta 4 years ago. British medal hopes tomorrow will focus on Denise Lewis, who is currently lying in third place in the heptathlon with just 3 events remaining. Paul Newman, BBC News, at the Sydney Olympics.
Finally, Michael Schumacher's Ferrari will start tomorrow's American Grand Prix at Indianapolis in pole position, ahead of McLaren's David Coulthard and Mika Häkkinen. Peter.
And the main news tonight, Tony Blair has arrived in Brighton for the Labour conference, insisting the party's in good shape, despite another shock for Labour in the opinion polls. That's the latest. There'll be news throughout the night over on BBC News 24. But for Rob and me, good night.
Prime Minister Tony Blair is David Frost's guest for breakfast tomorrow morning at 9 over on BBC Two.
Good evening to you. Well, hot work on the football field today. A few places reaching 25 degrees. That's 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, we've seen a few thunderstorms breaking forward this evening to the south of Ireland. A few pulses of heavy rain have been pushing northwards up across the province. Now, those storms and indeed some more persistent lines of rain are connected to that weather system, and that's going to be bringing some wet weather in from the southwest as we go through tonight. So most places, in fact, in the next 24 hours will see some showery bursts of rain. The heavier, more persistent rain is probably likely to be across more northern parts of the country during the day on Sunday. But tonight we can see some bright colours showing up on the radar. There is some heavy rain in there coming up through the Isles of Scilly just now. So it's across into Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and the West Country where we'll find some wet weather as the night goes on. It's still going to be a pretty breezy night as well, but a warm night, certainly quite a close night. Temperatures about 13 to 16 degrees in parts of the south. That's how things will line up in the morning then. Some bright sunshine for a time across central and eastern parts. And indeed it should be quite a warm morning as well, with temperatures soaring once again. But out in the west here we'll find these showery bursts of rain gradually moving in as the day goes on. Eventually some showery pulses pushing across East Anglia and the southeast of England during the second half of the afternoon. But as I say, there could be some more persistent wet weather, especially across the Pennines and up into the heart of Scotland through the afternoon. Eventually a few showers and some sunshine mixed in following from the southwest. It'll still be pretty warm in the east, up around 23 degrees, but the stronger winds will push northwards out across Scotland. More bright weather to come in the east on Monday, more rain though for the southwest. And that's it from me. Bye-bye.
In search of enlightenment.
Rama, Rama, hurry, hurry. self-improvement.
How many millionaires have you actually created? Could you hypnotize me?
My name's Louis.
My name's Louis. What's your favorite constellation?
And the perfect body.
Is there a market for this? Ow! That feels quite good.
But keep it real.
My money don't jiggle jiggle.
Louis Theroux's Weird Weekend. New series starts Monday at 9 on BBC Two.
I like long dresses.
Yeah, I don't mind them. Just can't relax till I know what's underneath them.
You think she's single?
Yeah. I think she's with a fat little baldy as her once a week.
Just another day at the office then. Attachments, new drama from the makers of This Life and The Cops. Starts Tuesday at 9 on BBC Two.
Colin Jackson begins his bid for gold. Stay up late with Olympic Grandstand tonight from 11:45 here on BBC One.